Millionaire pretended to lose everything to test his fiancée. What he discovered destroyed him. The cruise mansion was bathed in the warm golden glow of crystal chandeliers imported from Italy. The high ceilings and polished marble floors reflected the soft footsteps of servants tidying up after the afternoon tea. Classical music played faintly in the background, just enough to create an atmosphere of elegance without becoming intrusive. This was a world of money, order, and unspoken rules that never needed to be said aloud. In the center of that space, Isabella Moreno stood before a large mirror, adjusting a cream-colored silk dress that had just been flown in from Paris. It was a limited edition, so expensive that an ordinary family could live for an entire year on its price. She smiled with satisfaction, slowly turning to admire her figure, her eyes shimmering with the pride of someone accustomed to being worshipped. At that very moment, a tiny pair of arms suddenly wrapped around her thigh. "I'm hugging Mommy." Ash, one of the 3-year-old twins, giggled happily. Both of his small hands were smeared with melted chocolate from a candy bar he had just stolen from the kitchen. Dark brown stains spread clearly across the pale silk. The smile on Isabella's lips froze. "What is this?" she shrieked, yanking the child's hands away as if she were shaking off something filthy. "What did you do to my dress?" Ash froze. He had not yet understood what had happened when he was shoved backward a step, his wide eyes filling with tears. Samuel, his twin brother, stood behind him, clutching tightly to his brother's shirt, trembling as if sensing the storm that was about to break. Isabella could not control her rage. To her, the dress mattered more than any explanation. She raised her hand high, her cold palm slicing through the air, aiming straight for Ash's fragile little face. In that instant, time seemed to freeze. A figure rushed forward. Leora, the young nanny, did not have time to think. She only followed her instinct. Smack! The dry, cracking sound echoed across the vast living room, drowning out the classical music still playing in the background. Isabella's hand came down hard against Leora's left cheek. The blow was so strong that the cheap hair clip in Leora's hair flew off, skidding across the cold marble floor. Her face snapped to one side, her skin burning with pain. Yet her feet remained planted, not retreating even half a step. The 2 children were held tightly in her arms, their heads carefully shielded as if behind a living shield. The room fell into a deadly silence. Isabella froze for a second, then her rage flared even more violently. "You stupid girl!" she screamed. "How dare you interfere in my business?" Leora slowly lifted her head. 5 bright red fingerprints stood out clearly on her cheek. The eyes that were usually lowered, patient and gentle, now shone with something very different, painful, yet hard as steel. "Children should not be beaten, Mrs. Isabella," Leora said softly, her voice trembling slightly but firm. She tightened her hold on the twins. "A dress can be washed, but a blow to a child's soul can never be erased." Ash burst into tears against Leora's chest. Samuel sobbed too, his tiny hands clutching tightly at her old, faded apron. Isabella ground her teeth, her eyes blazing. It was no longer just about a stained dress. She had just been challenged by a servant inside her own mansion. The air in the living room was still thick after the slap. Leora bowed her head, soothing the 2 children, whispering words of comfort that meant nothing against a fear far too great for 3-year-olds. Isabella remained standing, breathing hard, her chest rising and falling as her anger had yet to subside. The silk dress stained with chocolate was clenched in her hand like evidence of an unforgivable insult. Then a deep voice rose from the grand hall. "Enough!" Everyone turned at once. Rowan Cruz stood beneath the large arched doorway leading into the living room. The man the press once called the shark of the construction industry looked so different today he was almost unrecognizable. His familiar Italian silk tie hung loosely and carelessly undone, his shirt wrinkled, his usually meticulous hair now slightly disheveled, as if he had spent hours running his hands through it. His sun-tanned, healthy face had gone pale. Dark circles shadowed his tired eyes. Rowan did not look at Leora, nor at the red marks on her cheek, but his hands were clenched tightly at his sides, his knuckles white. Isabella's expression changed instantly. In a single breath, her fury vanished, replaced by her familiar, helpless look. She spun around and rushed toward Rowan in hurried steps. "Darling, thank goodness you're home," she sobbed, trying to throw herself into his arms. Rowan did not step back, but he did not open his arms either. His body stood rigid, like a statue. "You must fire that woman immediately." Isabella pointed straight at Leora. "She dared to hurt my hand. And look at your children, so filthy. How can that be acceptable? My dress was custom-made for tonight's gala." Rowan took a deep breath. He slowly walked into the room, each step heavy, as if he were carrying the entire mansion on his shoulders. When he spoke, his voice was unusually low and hoarse. "There will be no gala, Isabella." She froze. "What did you say?" "There will be no shopping either," Rowan continued, then dropped heavily onto the expensive Italian leather sofa, his elbows resting on his knees. In that moment, he looked 10 years older. Isabella forced a laugh. "Stop joking, Rowan. I hate these games." Rowan did not smile. He raised both hands to cover his face. A choked sob escaped, raw and painfully real. Even with her head lowered, Leora felt a chill run down her spine. "It's over," Rowan murmured. "Everything is over." He lifted his head. His eyes were red, hollow. "The merger deal was a trap. The partners betrayed me. The company accounts have been frozen. The banks will seize the assets." Isabella blinked rapidly. What are you talking about? What do you mean, seize the assets?" Rowan pulled out his wallet and placed each black and platinum credit card onto the glass table in front of him. Then he put his phone on speaker and called the bank directly. "Dear customer, your account balance is insufficient to complete this transaction. Your account has been locked under a court order." The call ended in deadly silence. Rowan let out a soft laugh, a smile utterly devoid of life. "I have exactly 500 pesos in cash in my pocket. That is everything I own now." Isabella took a step back, as if Rowan had just brought home a contagious disease. "No, that's impossible. This is a test, isn't it, to see how I react?" Rowan shook his head. "The bank's people will come to seize the property before dawn. We have to leave here immediately." "Leave?" Isabella's voice cracked. "Go where? The Four Seasons? A resort in Valle de Bravo?" "Those places no longer belong to me," Rowan said slowly as he stood up. "All I have left is an old apartment on the working-class side of the city. It was left by my brother. It's under someone else's name, so it hasn't been touched yet." Isabella stood with her mouth open. She looked around the glittering mansion, then at the man before her as if he were a stranger. Rowan's words hung in the air like a sentence with no right of appeal. The mansion, which moments ago had been filled with light and the scent of expensive perfume, suddenly felt cold and unfamiliar. Isabella stood motionless for a few seconds. Then she burst out laughing. But it was not a joyful laugh. It was dry, warped, almost hollow. "That's impossible," she repeated, shaking her head. "You're exaggerating everything. You're Rowan Cruz. You can't be poor." Rowan did not answer. He simply turned and signaled for Leora to take the children upstairs and pack what was necessary. That single gesture made Isabella understand. This was not a joke. She stormed toward the master bedroom like a whirlwind. The wardrobe doors flew open. Designer dresses were ripped from their hangers and thrown mercilessly onto the bed. A harsh metallic clatter echoed as Isabella flung open the jewelry cabinet. Diamonds, emeralds, watches, necklaces. Everything poured out in a cold, glittering rain. "Never!" she screamed. "I will not live like a beggar. You can't make me suffer like this." Rowan stood at the doorway, watching in silence. His eyes no longer held anger, only a deep, exhausted weariness. "Isabella," he said slowly, "we're only taking what's essential. Those items have already been sealed on paper by the bank. If you're caught with them—" "I don't care," she snapped, turning sharply, clutching a handbag stuffed with jewelry to her chest. "If you're bankrupt, that's your fault. I have no reason to pay for your failure." At the far end of the hallway, Leora stood still, holding Ash's and Samuel's hands tightly. The two boys stared in confusion at the woman who used to smile at them every morning, now transformed into someone completely different. Rowan stepped away from Isabella's room and closed the door behind him, as if shutting an invisible door between them. He turned to Leora. "Leora?" She startled and bowed her head quickly. "Yes, sir." Rowan took a deep breath. "I can't pay your wages anymore. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. You should leave. Find somewhere safer." Leora was silent. She looked down at her worn shoes, then at the two children clinging to her dress as if to the last life raft. Memories rushed back, her first day seeking work, turned away because she had no guarantor. The day her mother was hospitalized, and Rowan had quietly paid every bill without deducting a single peso from her salary. She lifted her head. Her brown eyes shimmered with tears. "Sir," Leora said slowly, her voice trembling slightly but clear, "you gave me a job when no one else would hire me. You helped my mother live another year. I am not someone who runs when the ship meets a storm." Rowan froze. "If you and the children must move to that apartment," Leora continued, bending down to embrace Ash and Samuel, "then I will go with you. At the very least, the children will not have to face all of this alone." Samuel buried his head into her shoulder while Ash tightened his grip on her hand. Rowan felt his throat tighten, but he only nodded, saying nothing more. At that moment, Isabella emerged from the bedroom, dragging two large suitcases, both bulging. She cast a scornful glance at the scene before her. "How touching," she sneered. "Do you think loyalty pays the rent, or that we'll live on air?" Leora did not answer. She simply pulled the children closer to her. Isabella turned to Rowan. "You see, this is exactly the problem. Bringing along a useless maid will only add to your burden." Rowan looked at Isabella, then at Leora. For the first time during that long, exhausting night, he recognized a contrast so stark it hurt. On one side stood a woman who had everything yet thought only of herself. On the other, a woman who had nothing yet was willing to stay when everything fell apart. "We leave in 30 minutes, Rowan said firmly. "Only clothes and documents. No past." Isabella ground her teeth and spun away. Leora lowered her head, whispering to the children, "It's all right, my dears. Everything will be okay." But deep down, Leora understood clearly. From this moment on, they were not just leaving a mansion behind. They were leaving an old world, stepping into a place where true human nature would no longer have anywhere to hide. The massive iron gates of the Cruz mansion slowly opened into the night. Yellow lights spilled across the familiar stone-paved driveway, where only hours earlier the polished shoes of elegant guests had left their marks. Now everything lay silent, as if escorting a fallen dynasty into exile. There was no limousine, no armored SUV. Before them stood only an old gray sedan, its paint peeling in places, its doors scratched, its exhaust coughing weakly. When Rowan opened the rear door, the rusted hinge groaned in protest. Isabella stood frozen. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling more from shock than anger. "Are you joking with me?" "A friend's car," Rowan replied shortly. "No GPS. No one can track it." Isabella stepped back as if the filthy car might infect her. "I'm not getting into that thing. It smells like gasoline and sweat." Rowan did not argue. He bent down and opened the door for Ash and Samuel. Leora quickly lifted the two boys inside, carefully fastening the old, frayed seat belts. She sat between them, instinctively spreading her arms to shield them. "Get in, Isabella," Rowan said wearily, "or stay here and explain to the bank why you're still wearing a diamond watch." Grinding her teeth, Isabella cast one last look at the glittering mansion, then reluctantly climbed into the front seat, spreading a thin silk scarf over the seat before sitting down, her face twisted as if enduring an unforgivable punishment. The car shuddered, then rolled forward. They left the luxury district, passing broad avenues, straight rows of trees, and evenly spaced streetlights. But the farther they went, the more the scenery changed. Glass high-rises vanished. Bright neon lights gave way to flickering yellow bulbs. The roads grew rough. Trash appeared more frequently along the corners. Isabella pressed her face to the window, breathing rapidly. "Rowan, where are you taking us? This is a dangerous area. We'll be robbed. Or worse." "This is where working people live," Rowan replied, gripping the steering wheel. "People who live on exactly what they earn." At last the car stopped in front of an old 4-story building, its blue paint faded by sun and rain. Balconies hung heavy with laundry. In the courtyard below, a few young men gathered with loud music, their laughter mixing with the smell of dampness and street food. "We're here," Rowan said, turning off the engine. The car shuddered once more, then went still. "No," Isabella whispered, shaking her head repeatedly. No, I'm not getting out. This isn't a place for people to live." Leora opened the rear door. Night air rushed in, carrying damp smells, grease, and the earthy scent left after the afternoon rain. She smiled at the boys, softening her voice. "Come on, my dears," she said, as if inviting them on a picnic. "Let's pretend we're camping. Let's see who can climb the stairs the fastest." Sensing Leora's calm, Ash and Samuel timidly stepped out of the car. Rowan took the suitcases. Isabella remained frozen in her seat. "Isabella," Rowan said flatly, "we don't have gas to go anywhere else. Either come in or stay on the street." At last she stepped out, her high heels sinking into the uneven pavement. A few curious eyes glanced their way. Isabella pulled her fur coat tightly around herself, trembling not from cold, but from humiliation and fear. They climbed the narrow, dark stairwell where dampness mixed with the smell of cat urine. Rowan stopped at apartment 302 and slid the old key into the lock. The door opened. Inside lay a bleak space, a small living room doubling as a dining area, a tiny kitchen with cracked tiles, and 2 narrow bedrooms beyond. Dust coated the old furniture, and a single bare ceiling bulb swayed faintly. Isabella stepped inside, stared at the frayed sofa and peeling floor, then clutched her head and screamed, "You've dragged me into hell! I hate you, Rowan Cruz!" She kicked a chair violently. The crash echoed harshly. Meanwhile, Leora set down the suitcases and took off her coat without a word. She looked around, then began to move. Finding a broom in the corner, she swept a small patch of dusty floor. "Sir," Leora said with a calm that was almost unnatural, even as her cheek remained swollen, "if you help me move this cabinet, I can make a safe place for the children to sleep." Rowan stood motionless. To his left, Isabella, the woman of high society, was collapsing over lost comfort. To his right, Leora, the maid in her worn uniform, was rolling up her sleeves, cleaning a place that was not her own, simply so the children would have somewhere to rest. Rowan closed his eyes for a moment. He knew that although this trial had only just begun, the first lesson had already revealed itself. clear and more merciless than anything he had ever faced in his life. The first night in apartment 302 passed heavily, like a lingering fever. No one truly slept. The weak ceiling bulb cast a sickly yellow light, revealing every crack in the walls, every patch of peeling paint, like old scars that had never healed. There were no beds, only a sagging sofa in the middle of the room and the icy floor. Leora spread the old curtains she found in a cabinet to use as padding. She folded them again and again with obsessive care, as if a little more effort could keep the cold from touching the children's backs. She took off her only sweater and placed it beneath Ash's and Samuel's heads as pillows. The boys fell asleep from exhaustion and too much crying, their small hands still clutching the hem of Leora's dress even in their dreams. Isabella refused to lie down. She sat upright on the sofa, still wearing her fur coat, sweating from the heat, yet holding herself like an exiled queen. Every small sound, a scurrying rat, a leaking pipe, made her flinch, her face twisting in disgust. "I will not sleep here," she declared. "Tomorrow I'll find a decent hotel, even if I have to sell something." Rowan leaned against the wall, eyes closed but not asleep. He let Isabella's words drift past him like meaningless noise. His mind was stretched between two opposing images, selfish panic and silent sacrifice. The next morning the heat arrived early. The low, airless apartment had windows that would not fully open. The stagnant air quickly grew suffocating. Leora was the first to rise. She quietly stepped into the tiny kitchen and opened the cupboard. It was nearly empty. A small bag of rice, a few cans of fish, a half-empty bottle of water. No gas. Only an old, dust-covered electric burner. Leora took a deep breath and rolled up her sleeves. She rinsed the rice and cooked a thin pot of white porridge on the weak burner. When the scent of rice rose, Ash woke, rubbing his eyes, his voice hoarse. "I want chocolate milk." Leora paused for a moment, then smiled. "Let's change things up today. Pretend this is lemon snow." Ash pouted, but obediently sat down. Samuel was too tired. He sat on the floor, playing with a toy car missing a wheel that Leora had found in a suitcase. Isabella stepped out of the bathroom. What made Leora freeze was not her words, but the sight before her. Isabella looked perfect. Her hair was neatly styled, her refined makeup concealed the dark circles under her eyes, and her familiar vanilla mint perfume spread through the cramped space. The contrast was cruel, almost absurd. "What is that smell?" Isabella frowned. "Canned fish? My God, I'm not eating that. It smells like cat food." Leora set the bowls of rice before the boys. "It's only temporary, ma'am. When Mr. Rowan—" "I don't care," Isabella cut in. "I need coffee. At least Starbucks. I can't start my day in this rat hole." Rowan stepped out and heard the entire exchange. He looked at the plain bowls of rice, at the two hungry children eating slowly, then at Isabella. "We don't have money," he said. "This is everything." Isabella scoffed. "Then you eat it. I'll starve." But by noon, when the heat peaked and her stomach began to tighten, she rummaged through her handbag, muttering to herself. Leora said nothing. She divided the little rice among the children, eating only a few spoonfuls herself. The day dragged on, sticky like sweat on skin. In the afternoon, Ash grew irritable from hunger and exhaustion. Samuel lay stretched out on the floor, his eyes dull. "I'm hungry," Ash whispered. Leora pulled him into her arms, soothing him. "It's all right. Almost done." Isabella sat in the corner, scrolling her phone for a signal, her face irritated. "Make those kids be quiet," she snapped. "Their crying gives me a headache." Rowan looked at her, his gaze darkening. "They're hungry." "Children can stand a little hunger and not die," Isabella replied coldly. "You act like they're the center of the universe." Her words dropped into the tiny room like a heavy stone. Leora lowered her head, but her hands clenched tightly. She did not argue. She simply rose quietly to get water for the boys, as if every small act were a silent declaration. Inside that cramped apartment, each passing hour did more than drain their strength. It peeled away every mask. Poverty did not need to scream. It merely placed people into the same space and waited patiently to see who would become the protector, and who would become the one who walks away. By evening, apartment 302 had become a giant furnace. The heat that had built up all day had nowhere to escape, clinging to skin like a cruel reminder of reality. The old fan Leora found in the corner of the kitchen only pushed out weak streams of air, rattling as if on the verge of dying. Ash sat at the uneven wooden table, pushing his bowl of cold white rice back and forth. "I don't want to eat anymore," he whispered, his eyes red from exhaustion and hunger. Samuel lay flat on the floor, clutching his broken-wheel toy car, too weak even to cry. Leora knelt in front of the boys, trying to keep her voice gentle. "Just eat a little more, then you can sleep." Yet she could feel the hollowness in her own stomach tightening in waves. Isabella stepped out of the bathroom. She looked entirely different from everyone else in the apartment. Her golden hair was smoothly styled, her skin scented with mint and vanilla, her face carefully made up as if she were about to walk a red carpet rather than live in deprivation. On her shoulder, her designer handbag was still guarded carefully, like a final protective talisman. "Please," Isabella frowned, "tell the children to be quiet. The sound of chewing makes me nauseous." Leora bit her lip and stood, walking toward the kitchen for more water. As she bent to open the low cabinet, a strange scent drifted past, sharp, sweet chocolate, completely out of place in this poor apartment. She stopped. Leora turned toward Isabella. The woman had just turned her back and lightly set her handbag on a chair, her movements quick and cautious. One corner of the bag lay open. Leora approached, her heart racing. She did not want to suspect. She did not want to believe what she was thinking. But when she bent to pick up a silk scarf fallen beneath the chair, her eyes met what lay inside the bag. Shiny wrapped packets, a half-eaten box of Swiss chocolate, a pack of imported cold cuts, a jar of macadamia nuts, and on top, a small bottle of premium mineral water. Leora went rigid. In that moment, every sound in the room seemed to disappear. Only her own breathing remained. She looked up at Isabella, brown eyes flooded with tears, yet burning. "Ma'am," Leora's voice trembled. "The money Mr. Rowan gave to buy milk for the boys. You said you dropped it." Isabella turned, her eyes flashing briefly with caution before hardening into contempt. "So?" Leora pointed at the bag. You bought these?" Isabella followed her finger, then laughed. "Oh, that? I need to eat properly. I'm an adult. I need energy." Ash lifted his head at the word eat. He stepped closer and pointed at the handbag. "Candy," he whispered. "I can smell candy." Isabella immediately yanked the bag toward herself and sprang to her feet. "Back off. Don't touch my things." Leora stepped forward. For the first time in many years, she did not lower her head. "While the children starved all day, you were eating chocolate in the bathroom?" Isabella curled her lip. "They've had rice. Children can live on rice. I can't. I'm used to good food." Samuel crawled over and instinctively grabbed a slice of cold cut that had fallen from the bag, stuffing it into his mouth and chewing greedily. Isabella screamed and snatched the meat from his hand. Samuel burst into sobs. "That's enough," Isabella shouted. "Don't put on a moral show for me. You're the maid. Your job is to clean and keep the kids quiet." Leora felt her heart being crushed. "If Mr. Rowan finds out," Isabella stepped close, lowering her voice, each word slicing like a blade. "Do you think he'll believe you? A penniless freeloader?" She leaned in and whispered into Leora's ear. "All I have to do is say you stole the money, that you took things, you'll go to jail, and your mother, the one lying in the hospital, will have no one to take care of her." Leora froze. The fear she had always tried to hide was finally dragged into the light. Isabella straightened, adjusted her dress as if she had just stepped on something filthy. "Clean this place," she ordered, "and if I catch you feeding the children even a bite of my food, you will regret it." She took the mineral water bottle, went back into the bathroom, and slammed the door. Leora stood in the middle of the small room, her hands shaking. Ash and Samuel looked at her with wide, tear-blurred eyes. She knelt down and pulled them tightly into her arms, tears silently falling into their hair. "It's all right," she whispered, both to them and to herself. "I won't let anyone hurt you." She did not know that, several blocks away, Rowan was quietly listening to everything through tiny hidden devices. And every word Isabella had just spoken, every cry of the children, was carving deeper a sentence that could never be overturned. The night rain poured over the old neighborhood like an outburst of rage. Thunder tore across the sky, making the thin window panes rattle violently. Inside apartment 302, the ceiling bulbs swayed with every dry explosion of thunder, its sickly yellow light casting over faces worn down to exhaustion. Nearly 3 a.m. Rowan lay on the living room floor, his back against the damp wall. He was not asleep. His eyes were wide open, fixed on the stained ceiling, his ears straining for every smallest sound inside the apartment. In the next room, Ash and Samuel slept together on their makeshift bedding. Leora sat directly in front of the boys' door, her back to the wall, arms wrapped around her knees like a living barrier. Isabella lay on the sofa with her back to everyone, headphones clamped over her ears. She was not sleeping, only pretending not to hear the world collapsing around her. Then a scream rang out, not a cry, a raw, panicked scream. "Sir, Mr. Rowan, wake up!" Rowan sprang up instantly. His heart seized. He rushed toward the children's room. Leora was holding Samuel in her arms. The boy was burning like hot coals, his body jerking in short convulsions, his teeth chattering violently. His eyes rolled back, his breathing rapid and shallow. "Samuel has a high fever," Leora said in panic. "He's having seizures." Rowan placed his hand on his son's forehead. The scorching heat sent a chill through him. "We have to bring the fever down immediately," he ordered. "Cold water, now." Leora ran to the kitchen, nearly slipping on the rainwater leaking across the floor. She brought back a basin, soaked cloths, and repeatedly wiped Samuel's forehead and chest. The boy moaned weakly. The convulsions had not fully stopped. Isabella appeared at the doorway, wrapped in her fur coat, her face twisted in irritation at being woken. "What is going on? It's the middle of the night. Stop making a scene." "Your son is convulsing," Rowan growled. "We need a doctor, right now." Isabella folded her arms. "Then take him to the hospital." "We don't have a car," Rowan said quickly. "The old car's battery is dead. I need your phone. Call an ambulance." Isabella stepped back half a pace, clutching her handbag. "No, my phone is almost out of battery. I need it for myself." Rowan stared at her in disbelief. "What could be more important than my son's life?" "You're exaggerating," Isabella said coldly. "Kids get fevers all the time. Put him in cold water. That's enough. I have a headache. I need to sleep." Leora snapped her head up, her eyes bloodshot. "Ma'am, his breathing isn't regular. He could suffer brain damage without medicine." Isabella shrugged. "What do you know? You're not a doctor." Rowan felt anger flare like fire, but he restrained it. He could not reveal anything now. He turned to Leora. "Do we have any fever medicine left?" Leora shook her head, tears streaming. "None, sir. It's been gone for a long time." Outside, thunder roared again. Rain hammered the metal roof like war drums. "There's a night pharmacy," Leora said quickly, her voice shaking yet firm. "More than 2 kilometers away, across the main avenue." "No," Rowan replied instinctively. "In this rain, it's dangerous." Leora stood, placing Samuel into Rowan's arms. "You stay. He needs your voice. I'll go." "We don't have money," Rowan whispered. Leora did not answer. She hurried to the corner, threw on her thin jacket, then paused for a brief second. She looked down at her hand. On her ring finger was a small old gold ring with a faded blue stone. No one noticed as she slipped it off. "Take care of him," Leora said, already turning toward the door. "Don't let him sleep." The door slammed shut, leaving Rowan holding his burning son. Isabella muttered something irritably and returned to the sofa, pulling the blanket over her head. Rowan cradled Samuel, wiping his forehead and whispering meaningless reassurances. Inside him, a primal fear was screaming. For the first time since beginning this entire charade, he felt he was losing control. Outside, Leora ran. Rain lashed her face, cold wind slicing her skin. Her thin canvas shoes were quickly soaked through. She slipped once, scraping her knee until it bled, but she stood up immediately and kept running. In her mind there was only one image: Samuel's burning, trembling body. When she burst into the brightly lit pharmacy, the clerk startled. "I need fever medicine for a child," Leora gasped. "Strong medicine, right now." "Do you have a prescription?" the man asked. Leora searched her pockets. Empty. She swallowed hard, then placed the ring on the counter. "This is gold, please. Exchange it for the medicine. I don't need any change." The clerk took the ring, looked into her panicked eyes, then sighed. "All right." Meanwhile, inside apartment 302, Samuel let out a weak moan. Rowan sat on the floor with his back against the wall, one hand holding a wet cloth to his son's forehead, the other clenched until his knuckles turned white. For the first time in many years he prayed, not as a wealthy man asking for more blessings, but as a father terrified beyond measure. Across the room, Isabella opened her eyes. She sat up very slowly, careful not to make a sound. Through a small gap in the blanket, she watched Rowan bent over the child, completely consumed by panic. There was no worry in Isabella's eyes, only calculation. She rose quietly, picked up her handbag, and walked toward the window, to find a signal. When she saw that Rowan was not paying attention, she turned her back to him and pulled out her phone. The screen lit up. She dialed a familiar number. "Wait, Lawyer Montes?" Isabella whispered urgently. "I need to speak to you right now. No, I don't care what time it is." Rowan stiffened. His hearing was unnaturally sharp in the night silence. He did not turn around, but every word from Isabella cut into him clearly as a blade. "The situation has changed," Isabella continued, her back still to him. "Rowan is finished, truly bankrupt. We're living in a slum. The children are sick. No doctors, no medicine." She paused to listen, then smiled coldly. "Yes, just as you said. This is the perfect moment." Rowan closed his eyes. His fingers tightened further around the cloth. "The children's maternal family, they still want custody, don't they?" Isabella asked, her voice suddenly sweet. "If they knew the boys were living like this, I think they would be very concerned." She stepped farther away, lowering her voice as if negotiating a commodity. "I can testify. I'll say Rowan has lost control, is financially unfit, and is keeping the children in dangerous conditions. I'll sign any documents you need." Rowan opened his eyes. The blood in his veins turned cold. "In return," Isabella said without hesitation, "I want $2 million, transferred directly to my personal account, tomorrow morning." A brief silence. Then Isabella gave a soft laugh. "That's right. When you arrive, I'll open the door. I'll hand over the children personally. Rowan won't have time to react." Samuel moaned faintly. Rowan bent down to cover his son's mouth, though in truth he was hiding his own violent trembling. "No, I'm not joking," Isabella continued, her eyes gleaming with greed. "They're just burdens. I'm not sacrificing my future for 2 children who aren't mine." She ended the call and exhaled lightly, as if relieved of an annoying obligation. When she turned back, she startled to find Rowan looking at her. For a split second, Isabella's mask nearly slipped, but she quickly regained her composure. "What are you staring at?" She frowned. "Is your son all right?" Rowan did not answer. He simply bent down and held Samuel tighter, hiding eyes that were bloodshot and burning with something dangerous. Isabella shrugged and returned to the sofa. "So troublesome," she muttered. "Every night is drama." She did not know that the phone Rowan had placed on the floor beside the empty bread bag was quietly recording everything. Outside, the rain began to ease. The apartment door burst open. Leora appeared, soaked from head to toe, her hair plastered to her face. In her hands was a bag of medicine, carefully wrapped in her jacket. Her lips were purple from the cold, but her eyes shone with hope. "I've got the medicine," she gasped. "Quickly, sir." Rowan rose at once. As he reached for the medicine bag, his eyes fell on Leora's bare hand. "Where is your ring?" he asked softly. Leora froze for a second, then shook her head. "It doesn't matter, sir. Save the boy first." Rowan said nothing more. But in that moment, all the pieces fell into place. On one side was the woman who had sold her only keepsake to save a child who did not share her blood. On the other was the woman ready to sell that same child to buy back her life of luxury. 2 extremes. 2 verdicts. When the medicine was given, Samuel slowly stopped trembling. His breathing steadied. Rowan closed his eyes, resting his forehead against his son's, shaking with relief. Isabella leaned against the wall, watching the scene with impatience. In her mind there was only one thought: tomorrow morning. Dawn came slowly after the stormy night. Pale gray light slipped through the filthy window of apartment 302, revealing puddles still clinging to the floor and faces hollowed by a sleepless night. Samuel lay quietly in Leora's arms, his breathing steadier, his skin no longer burning red. Ash slept beside them, one small hand gripping the edge of Leora's dress as if afraid that letting go would make everything disappear. Rowan stood with his back to the wall, silently watching. His eyes had changed. There was no longer the weariness of a defeated man, no longer the confusion of someone who had lost everything. In its place was a cold, sharpened clarity, like a blade honed again after days of dullness. Isabella woke with her familiar irritation. She stretched, scanned the cramped apartment with disdain, then immediately checked her phone. The battery remained. The signal was weak, but enough to receive notifications. No new messages. She frowned, displeased. "What time is it?" she asked drowsily. "Almost 7, Rowan replied. His calm tone made Isabella glance at him in mild surprise. "You should get ready." "Get ready for what?" Isabella asked cautiously. Rowan gave a faint smile. "People will be coming this morning." Isabella did not ask more. Last night's call replayed clearly in her mind. She went into the bathroom, fixed her hair, reapplied her lipstick out of habit. She needed to look flawless. When they arrived, she had to appear as a woman who had sacrificed everything, not a traitor. Meanwhile, Rowan knelt beside Leora. "Samuel will be fine," he said softly. "The medicine is working." Leora nodded, dark circles under her eyes. "Thank God," she whispered. Then, as if remembering something, she looked at Rowan hesitantly. "Sir, last night I heard Miss Isabella on the phone." Rowan raised his hand to signal silence. "I know," he said quietly. "And I need you to trust me one more time." Leora met his eyes. There was no longer blind fear there, only trust built from blood, sweat, and a life-or-death stormy night. She nodded, Around 8 in the morning, footsteps echoed down the old hallway. Not one person, several. Heavy, deliberate leather shoes. Nothing like the building's residents. Isabella straightened at once. She took a deep breath and opened the door before Rowan could move. Before her stood not a lone lawyer. There were 4 men in black suits with earpieces, standing in neat formation. Behind them was a doctor carrying a medical case and an older man in a long coat, his gaze cold and severe, the legal representative of the children's maternal family. Isabella went pale. "Good morning, Ms. Moreno," the older man said. "We are here following your urgent request last night." Isabella turned to look for Rowan, but he was already standing right behind her. "What is this?" she stammered. "You said it would only be—" "Only a lawyer?" Rowan cut in, his voice deep and clear. "I thought you'd feel more at ease if there were also a doctor and witnesses." Isabella swallowed hard. What are you doing?" Rowan stepped forward. His posture straightened, his shoulders squared, his gaze sharpened. "The performance is over, Isabella." He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. Isabella's voice filled the cramped room, cruelly clear. "I want $2 million. I will hand over the children personally. They're just burdens." Isabella staggered back, her face drained of color. "No, that's not... It was edited." Rowan continued playing the recording. Each sentence, each word, fell like a hammer blow. The men in black suits showed no surprise. They merely observed, as if prepared for this moment. "Ms. Isabella Moreno," the legal representative said coldly. "With this evidence, any attempt by you to approach the children may be considered a criminal offense." Isabella trembled. "Rowan, listen to me. I was just under stress." Rowan looked at her, without anger, without pain, only absolute contempt. "You were not forced. You chose." He turned to Leora. "Take the children." Leora lifted Samuel into her arms. Ash took her hand. The doctor stepped forward, checked the boy quickly, and nodded to confirm he was stable. Isabella screamed, "No, I am your fiancé!" "You can't do this to me." Rowan stepped close and said slowly, each word measured, "From the moment you made that call, you became nothing." He turned to the security team. "Escort her out. Leave her luggage. This apartment is paid through the end of the month." Isabella screamed and struggled, but it was useless. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving a heavy silence. Rowan let out a long breath. Apartment 302 fell into absolute silence. After Isabella's desperate screams faded down the hallway, only the steady breathing of the 2 children remained, along with the short-clipped radio chatter of the security team. The damp, impoverished space, once filled with fear, hunger, and betrayal, now felt like a stage after the curtain had fallen. Rowan stood in the middle of the room. There was no trace left of a defeated man. His shoulders no longer sagged. His gaze was no longer dulled by loss. His back was straight, his stance open, his eyes sharp and still like the surface of a deep lake. Leora looked at him, her heart pounding. "Sir," her voice trembled. Then, everything that just happened. Rowan slowly turned. "It was real," he said, but it was real within a staged reality. He stepped to the rickety table and rested his hand on its chipped surface. "I was never bankrupt. My company never collapsed. The frozen accounts, the old car, this apartment, all of it was arranged." Leora staggered back, covering her mouth. "Why?" she whispered. Rowan closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the coldness was gone, replaced by the weariness of a father. "I was about to get married," he said quietly. "I was about to place my life and my children's lives into the hands of a woman. I needed to know, when everything disappeared, who would stay." A security officer stepped forward and placed a tablet on the table. The screen lit up. Images appeared in succession like irrefutable blows. Isabella striking Leora in the mansion. Isabella hiding food in her handbag while the children starved. Isabella slipping a watch into her apron. And finally, the midnight call, every word clear. I will hand over the children. I want 2 million. Leora trembled, tears falling onto the floor. Rowan clenched his jaw. She didn't just betray me, he said. She betrayed the final boundary of what it means to be human. Outside, Isabella's footsteps faded. There was no limousine, no bodyguards, no apology left to be accepted. She was left behind, exactly where she had despised, in the very life she had feared most. Rowan turned to the security team. This apartment remains hers through the end of the month. After that, all support ends. Yes, sir. He turned back to Leora. This time his voice lowered, not as a command, but as an acknowledgement. And you? Leora bowed her head by old habit. Sir, I only did what I should have done. Rowan shook his head. No, he said. You did far more than that. He stepped forward and stopped in front of her. When I gave you permission to leave, you stayed. When my children were struck, you shielded them. When their lives were in danger, you sold your only ring. Leora broke into sobs. While one woman was willing to sell children to buy her freedom, Rowan said slowly, each word carved into the air, you sold your memories to save them. Then Rowan did something no one in the room expected. He bowed his head to Leora, not the bow of an employer to a servant, but the bow of one human being before another, of higher character. Leora, he said, you did not pass the test because I designed it. You passed it because this is who you are. The doctor stepped forward, announcing that Samuel was completely out of danger. Ash slept peacefully in the medic's arms. Outside, the armored convoy waited, headlights reflecting off the rain-soaked pavement. Rowan placed a coat over Leora's shoulders and guided her and the children outside. We're going home, he said. Months later. The Cruz mansion was no longer cold. The sharp clicking of high heels had vanished, replaced by children's laughter, the scent of fresh bread, and music drifting through wide-open windows. Leora no longer wore a uniform. She became the household's life manager, personally caring for and making decisions for Ash and Samuel. She had her own room, a contract, a future, and most importantly, respect. Rowan stood on the balcony watching the boys run circles around Leora, calling her by the name they had chosen. Mom Leora. He did not stop them, because some titles do not require paperwork. They are granted through actions. Elsewhere in the city, Isabella Moreno vanished from luxury parties and society magazines. No scandal, no sympathy, just a name erased. Rowan looked at his family and let out a quiet breath. He had once believed power was money, but in the end, he understood. The most valuable thing is not the person who stands beside you when you are rich, but the one who stays when you have nothing.